What would you do if the tide rang your name from an empty bell? If a dead mill's staircase counted the steps you did not take? And if a two-lane road folded the same mile in front of you again and again? Welcome back to Horror Valley. Tonight we are sharing 3 disturbing true stories from the Pacific Northwest's fog-soaked harbors, moss-choked mill towns, and midnight backroads. For privacy, some names, dates, and locations have been changed, but these are first-hand accounts from people who swear they lived them. From a harbor bell that ties knots you cannot see, to stairs that tap from underneath, to a loop road that slips a seatbelt over the empty back seat. The night out here has rules you do not want to test. Kill the lights, put on headphones, and drop your location and current time in the comments. Like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you do not miss what waits past the next turn. If you have never lived by a working harbor, you do not know how sound travels in fog. It finds you. It bends corners and creeps under doors. I learned that when I went back to Gray Harbor in Washington last September to clean out my Aunt Mara's little craft shop by the water. I had not been back since I was a kid. She passed in summer, quiet and alone, and left me the place. I thought it would be simple. Box up yarn and driftwood angels, sell a few old glass floats, maybe sleep 2 nights above the shop. Then I heard the bell. The shop sat on weathered pilings over tide flats that stretched out like slick gray muscle when the water pulled back. Everyone told me not to step onto the flats. People told me that when I was 8, and they told me again at 32. I laughed it off. I had boots. I had a phone light. I did not have the ocean sense the old folks had. Gray Harbor is like that. It looks sleepy. Bait shops, a bar with a neon crab, a cannery with a roofline like broken teeth. But it has rules that are not written down. The first thing I noticed inside the shop was how damp it smelled. Yarn and salt do not do well together. My aunt always kept a dehumidifier running. It was unplugged and warm, so I plugged it back in and felt stupid when it rattled to life. Things were tidy in a way that felt wrong. All the scissors were in a coffee can. All the shells were sorted by size in jars. A paper calendar on the wall had nothing written on it except tide times. The last week was filled into the hour. Low tide had a little dot each day. I tried not to think about that. I made a bed out of blankets on the office floor upstairs. The office had a little window that looked down at the walkway and the pilings. I ate a sandwich, drank cold coffee, and tried to breathe through that quiet that coastal towns get after dusk. It is not silence. It is the opposite. The gulls never shut up. The rigs on boats clink. There is always water moving somewhere, even if you cannot see it. I do not know when I fell asleep, but a sound pulled me out of it sometime around 2. It was a bell. Not the long moan of the harbor horn. Not a buoy bell offshore. This was closer. It had weight to it. It did not ring on a rhythm. It rang like a mindless thing that still knows when to speak. 1 ring, then a stretch of breath, then 2 that made my teeth feel weird. I lay there and listened to it come through the floorboards. It felt like it was under the shop. I told myself it was just a chain bumping a piling. I pulled on my jacket and went downstairs. The walkway outside was wet and slick. Fog had come in off the channel and pushed itself tight against the buildings. If you have not seen that kind of fog, you would not believe how thick it gets. I could not even see the bar across the street. My breath hung in front of me like smoke. The bell went off again. It sounded like one of those old rusted bells they put on docks to call crews back in. My aunt had one like that. It used to hang by the door with a rope on it so kids could ding it when they bought a painted rock. It was not on the door anymore. The hook was empty. The rope was gone. That hit me right behind the knees in a way I cannot explain. I did not know why. I followed the sound down the steps to the lower deck where the shop sat right over mud when the tide was out. The water had gone. You could smell the flats, sweet and rotten at the same time, like dead grass and iron. Every few feet were little holes that spat air with wet clicks, and the whole gray sheet shimmered under the fog like it was alive. I clicked my phone light on and saw the glimmer of something out there. It looked like a bell. It looked like the same bell that used to hang by the door, lying on its side, rope trailing like a tail. It should not have been there. You do not leave heavy brass out on the flats unless you mean to lose it. It rang again. It did not move when it rang. That is the part I remember best. The sound came, and it did not vibrate, and my stomach went tight. I laughed out loud. Too sharp, because that happens when you are scared and alone. I said her name by accident. I said, "Mara." Without meaning to, I stepped down off the last plank. The mud took my boot like a slow hand. It did not want to give it back. Cold went up my leg all the way to the hip in one long breath. I froze and tried to lean back toward the deck, but the plank had a slick coat of brown on it and my fingers skated. I think I said a bad word real soft. Then I heard another sound that shut everything else down. Someone laughed out on the flats. I do not mean a drunk guy by the bar or a teenager on a dare. It was close to me. It sounded like a woman trying to laugh quiet, that little breathy way you do when you are not supposed to be amused. It sounded like my aunt when I dropped a jar of beads as a kid and tried not to cry. Every hair on my arms lifted. I turned my phone toward the bell and saw the faint shape of a person crouched behind it, their head tilted over the top, very slow. It did not look right. The neck seemed too long. The hair hung straight down like wet eelgrass. The bell rang again, louder this time, even though it did not move. My molars hurt. I could feel it in my skull. The crouched shape lifted a hand and pointed at me. Then that hand twisted like a wrist turning a rope. Something cold and unseen cinched around my ankle under the mud. I swear I felt a knot tighten, neat and practiced, the way my aunt used to do when she tied off a fishing line. And in the fog, close enough that I could feel the breath of it on my ear, I heard a voice whisper my name. It said my name the way she used to when I was a kid and would pretend to sleep soft and close, but the breath was cold and tasted like rust. I did not turn my head. I knew if I turned, I would go over. The knot around my ankle tightened once, neat and sure, and I sucked air through my teeth and grabbed for the rail. The bell rang again. It rang inside my skull. It rang like the mud itself had a mouth. The shape behind the bell rose a little higher, neck lifting, hair sliding off one sharp shoulder. It was not the way a person moves. It was the way a crane lifts out of still water, without making a ripple. I said her name without meaning to, and the shape tilted its head like it was trying to remember how to wear a face. "Late," the voice breathed, right against my ear, though the shape was still out by the bell. "You are late." "I am going back," I said. I tried to make my voice steady. "I am going back inside." The knot cinched. Mud swallowed the second boot to the ankle. I felt fingers under the surface that were not fingers. They teased the back of my heel, found the tendon, slid over bone. The cold went up my spine and lit up the back of my eyes. I leaned hard on the rail and rocked my trapped leg the way my aunt taught me to do when I got stuck in wet sand as a kid. Do not yank, do not panic, let water in, let it loosen. The mud made a tiny sucking sigh, and I pulled until the leather bit my skin. The bell rope lay like a black vein across the flats. It twitched when the bell rang, even though the bell did not move. I reached for it, thinking like an idiot that I could pull myself back, and my fingers touched something smooth and slimy that was not rope. It flexed like a living thing. I yanked my hand away and almost lost the rail. "Up," the breath at my ear said. "Up, up, the water is turning." She used to say that. She used to stand in the doorway of the shop with her coffee, watch the gulls, and say, "Listen, it is turning." I hated how my eyes stung. I hated how part of me wanted to go where that voice wanted me to go because it sounded like home. "Stop," I said. "Stop, Mara." The shape behind the bell went still. I saw the line of a jaw. I saw teeth that looked too many and too small. The bell rang once like a laugh and then again like a cough. My phone light skittered across the flats and caught on something white near my boot. It was a broken shell, edge like a knife. I went down on one knee. The mud kissed the front of my jeans, cold and wet. I shoved my hand deep and found the loop around my ankle. It was not rope. It was a braid of eelgrass and fish slick hide and something like the old twine my aunt used to use that smelled like oil. It pulsed when I touched it. I set the shell edge to it and sawed. The sound it made felt wrong in my ears, like cutting into meat that is still deciding if it will be dead. The bell hammered. The shape's head tipped back and the long throat opened wide and wider, and I heard my name dragged out in a voice that was two voices at once. The thing under the mud braided another loop around my other ankle and pulled. I bit my tongue so I would not scream. Blood ran hot into the salt and made my mouth taste like pennies. The shell slipped. It sliced my knuckle. I kept sawing. I thought of my aunt's hands, quick and clever, tying a bowline in one clean motion. "The rabbit comes out of the hole," she would say, laughing. "Round the tree. Back down." I put my thumb against the knot I could not see and pressed the bite the way she taught me until something in it gave a little. The loop slackened a breath. I used that breath. I tore my foot out of the boot and left the boot to the flat. Cold hit the skin of my bare ankle so deep I thought it would crack. I threw myself backward and landed on the bottom step. Wood slammed my spine. The knot still had me. It dragged. I grabbed the rail with both hands and hooked my elbow through so it would have to pull my whole arm out before it pulled me. The cleat on the post dug into my ribs. The rope, whatever it was, snapped tight and then loosened and snapped again, like something testing my weight. The shape by the bell slid forward an inch without taking a step. It smiled. It looked like my aunt and did not. Its upper lip did not cover all its teeth. The fog shifted. The tide sighed as it turned. A wash of water ran in a thin sheet across the flats and touched my toes. The cold climbed. The bell rang twice fast, and I felt the knot surge. I drove the shell edge down hard one more time. The eelgrass twine tore with a sound like an old shirt ripping. The pull vanished so quick I slammed back into the stairs and saw stars. I did not look at the bell. I crawled backward up the steps on my hands and one heel. Something touched my bare ankle once, like a kiss, and then slid away. I stood up and lurched for the door. The knob was slick with fog. I fumbled it twice and got inside and shoved the bolt. The shop smelled like salt and wool. Water seeped under the threshold in a thin line. The bell rang outside the door in a slow, patient way, like someone waiting to be let in. I went upstairs and sat on the floor with my back to the office wall until my heartbeat stopped hurting. When the bell finally fell quiet, dawn was paling the fog like old milk. I went down with my bag and did not look out the window. The hook by the door had something on it when I passed. The bell hung there, dry. The rope was coiled neat, a knot tied near the end that I recognized from 100 summers of watching my Auntie's hands. I did not touch it. I drove away while the gulls screamed and the harbor woke. My ankle had a bruise like a ring, clean and angry with a little dark mark where a knot would sit. It has not faded. In my apartment, 3 states inland, it tightens when rain moves in. On foggy nights when the street outside my window goes quiet and the air turns heavy, I hear a bell ring from the room below me without anything moving and something under the bed pulls once neat and practiced as if checking the knot. If you grew up in Timberline, you know about the stairs behind the mill. You do not talk about them like a story. You talk about them like weather. They are just there, slick with moss, sunk in the hillside like a spine, running from the rusted catwalks down to the river that used to feed the saws. I moved away after high school and swore I would not come back. Then my mom got sick last winter, and I came home to help her sell the house. I told myself I would not go near the mill. I lasted 3 days. The mill sits like a carcass now. The big doors are chained. The roof is sagged in places where snow and rain sat too long. There is a smell that never left even after the machine stopped, a bitter hot scent like burned pitch and wet iron. When the wind comes down the valley just right, you can hear the long belt slap a pulley, even though there is nothing moving. People say sound sticks to places like that. People say other things too. "You do not count the stairs," Cal told me in the diner when he heard I was back. He worked the green chain when I was a kid, and his hands are still nicked up like old bark. You go up or down, you keep moving. If you count, they count back. That is how it starts. What does that mean? I asked, laughing because it felt dumb to be scared of concrete. He did not laugh. He stared at his coffee and said, "You know how many people we lost to the river. Do not go back there alone, boy." I waited for a sunny day because it felt like a brave day. That is what I told myself. It was not sunny when I went. It was one of those gray afternoons where the clouds sit low and the cedar trees drop cold water on your neck every time the wind breathes. I parked on the shoulder by the gate and walked the gravel road along the fence. Deer tracks were set in the mud, sharp and soft at the same time. I felt like I was trespassing in a place that had not forgotten me. The stairs start behind the boiler house where the concrete wall sweats even when the air is dry. The first few are normal, chipped edges, rebar stains bleeding like old wounds. Ferns stick their tongues through the cracks. Someone had spray painted a smiley face on the landing years ago, and weather had peeled it into a grimace. The rail on the left side is metal. The right side has a lagging rope strung between posts, slick with lichen like an old vein. Below the steps, the hillside drops into alder and sword ferns and a ditch that carries runoff down to the river. Everyone told us as kids not to go there because of nails and old glass and the kind of things that want to live under stairs. I told myself I would go 10 steps and stop. I wanted to see. I wanted to prove the stories were nothing. I put my boot on the first tread and felt a cold that did not match the air. It went up through the sole like a needle and sat behind my knee. The second step was warmer. The third was warmest. I paused and listened. Somewhere deep in the husk of the mill, something knocked like a slow heartbeat. The river was low and made a hollow sound as it ate at the bank. I did not mean to count. My lips just did it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The sound of my voice felt wrong in my ears. It sounded like a much bigger room answering me. On 7, there was a scrape below me. On 8, the rail felt wet and then my hand came away dry. On 10, a smell like green water came up between the risers. It smelled like the ditch under the bridge in summer when fish die small and soft. There are names scratched into the concrete where it was poured. They run up the side like scars. Some I knew. Tally, Bird, Rico. My dad's name was there too, near the middle where the mold lines change. I traced the letters without thinking. The grooves were sharp, not worn, like someone had cut them last week. He died working swing shift when I was 9. He fell at night and the river took him. They found his hat a mile downstream, stuck in a snag with a tuft of hair. The rest was a story men tell with their eyes down. I climbed to a landing where the stairs take a turn against the rock. The concrete there is darker. A dark stain runs down the wall like something boiled from inside the stone. I touched it, and my finger came away clean but cold. The rail hummed. I do not mean it trembled. I mean it hummed a note I knew from childhood. It was the exact key the head saw used to make when a knot hit just wrong. The whole valley would sing for a second, and then it would stop. I stood still, holding my breath, and the sound held me like a hand on the back of my neck. "Keep moving," I said out loud, because Cal had said that. "Do not count. Keep moving." I took one more step and felt a soft give under my heel. I looked down and saw a wet footprint on the tread below, the size of my foot turned the wrong way. It pointed up at me like someone had been standing there a breath ago and stepped backward into me. I looked up the run ahead and saw another wet print 2 steps above. Again turned to face me. My mouth went dry. The rail sang once more, very soft, like something licking its teeth. I took my hand off the rail and felt the air against my palm, cold and damp, like breath. The ditch below the stairs gurgled and then went quiet like it swallowed its own voice. A whisper ran from under the steps. It was not words at first. It was a noise I would have called water if it had not shivered like a throat. Then it said my name in a voice that sounded like my dad when he was tired. It said it right from the dark slit between the risers by my feet. "Do not," I said, backing up a half step. Do not do that. Something tapped the underside of the tread. Once, twice, 3 times. It felt like knuckles, but the sound was hollow like an empty log. I shined my phone down between the steps. Light slid over cobweb and wet rock and then caught on something that should not have been there. A little pocket knife lay on a shelf of stone, blade half open, red paint worn off the handle to silver. My dad used to carry one just like that, with a chip in the blade where he had pried open a paint can. The light trembled. A thin hand slid out from the shadow under the stair, palm up, pale as grubs, wet to the wrist. It held the knife and turned it like an offering. The nails were too long. They clicked once on metal. Then the fingers lifted, slow and patient, and reached for my ankle. The fingers closed around my ankle before I could jerk back. They were cold the way creek stones are cold, with slick skin that did not feel like skin. The knife in the pale hand tilted, then pressed into my palm as if someone were setting silverware at a table. The chipped blade rested against my thumb. A voice under the stair said my name soft, like a sigh from deep in the wood. It sounded like my dad when he came home late, worn out and empty. "Take it," the voice breathed. "Keep moving." I hauled my leg up, but the grip did not fight me. It guided me, like a parent showing a child where to place their feet. The rail hummed through my bones, a low note that matched my heartbeat. Another shape shifted under the stair, dark against darker, and something thin and root-like slid up around my other ankle. It was not a rope. It felt like alder roots and old twine twisted together with spider silk and grit. It cinched neat as a knot. "Do not," I said, because that was all I had. The wet footprint 2 steps above me darkened, as if a fresh heel had pressed into it. The rail sang higher. From under my boot a soft tap started. 1, then another, 2. The taps were careful and patient, like someone counting nails into a board. I did not want to hear 3. I bent, jammed the little knife between the root twine and my skin, and sawed. The blade bit with a feel I hated. It rasped through something that did not want to be cut and did not want to bleed. A smell came up like turned earth and old sawdust. The tapping under my foot did not stop. 3, 4. The voice from the dark slit rose into words I could almost make out. "Do not count," I said louder. "I am not counting." "You already did," the voice said, and it was my dad's voice and not his. "You started it, they finish it, keep moving." I tore through the last tough strand. My ankle stung. The cut loop loosened and the cold slid away like a disappointed hand. I shoved the knife in my pocket without thinking and took 2 steps up. The air got colder against my teeth. The rail thrummed and the taps followed me, not under the same tread, but under each new one I touched. 5, 6. The numbers were not mine, but they were there all the same. I kept my eyes on the landing above. The stain down the wall looked wet now, curtains of dark that almost moved. I told myself not to look at the concrete side where the names were scratched. I looked anyway. A new line had started under my dad's name, just a faint cut, the suggestion of the first letter of mine. The groove shivered like a thing alive. I climbed faster. Wet footprints bloomed ahead, always facing me, always fresh. I did not hear the river anymore. I heard breath, the kind that comes out of a lot of open mouths at once. The ditch gurgled and then swallowed itself again. Under my feet the taps went on, 7, 8. I knew without knowing that when they reached whatever their end was, something would happen that I could not undo. "Keep moving," the voice urged, near and far. "Do not stop on the landings." The landing was 4 steps away. I took them quick, heel and toe, and the rail sang in my hand. I felt the rough of it change, like a hand sliding under mine. For a moment I was sure a palm rested there, big and hard and familiar, the way my dad used to steady me crossing the creek on a log. I almost said thank you. On the landing the taps did not pause. 9, The stain on the wall bulged like something behind it had pressed a face against the concrete. I did not look. I took the turn and climbed into colder air. The lot above was a gray slice between cedar tops. 10 happened on the last tread before daylight. The sound under my foot was not a tap that time. It was a knock, deep and hollow like a hand on a coffin. I jumped the final step and landed on gravel. The humming cut off so hard it made my ears ring. I stood there with my breath wrecked and my heart going. The mill hunched behind me like a sleeping animal. The stairs lay quiet down the hill, dark ribbon through green. Water finally found its voice again. I turned and walked the road back to my car without looking down. The knife in my pocket was heavy and wet. When I reached the gate, I pulled it out and the blade was half open, the chip in the edge catching light. It smelled like green water. I should have thrown it into the river. I should have flung it as far as I could. I did not. I put it in the glove box and drove to my mom's. I told myself it was just a thing I dreamed up on a gray day in a dead place. I lasted 2 nights. On the first night, I woke to a quiet knock that I thought was the front door. It was not. It came from under the stairs in the hall, once, twice, 3 times. The air smelled like wet cedar. In the morning, there were damp footprints on the bottom 3 steps, turned toward me. They faded while I watched. The knife sat on the kitchen table, blade half open, though I had not taken it out of the car. I left town fast after the house sold. In my apartment across the mountains, the phone health app says I climb more flights than my building has. Some nights it shows a neat row of numbers counted in the dark. 11, 10, 9. I have learned not to watch it tick down. Last week I heard a tired voice on the landing above my place say my name the way he used to, and something under the last step tapped once more, very polite, like it had reached 1 and was waiting to see if I would help it get to 0. If you have never been to Cradle Creek, you would not think a 2-lane road could hold a grudge. People there call it the Loop like it is one word, broken only by trees and fog. It runs out along the river, swings through cedar and alder like a belt around town, and drops you back by the feed store if you mind your speed. They say not to drive it after midnight, not because of drunks or deer, but because the Loop does not like to let go once the night sits on it right. I thought that was an old logger thing. I was wrong. I moved back to Cradle Creek at the start of fall to help my sister sell our mom's place. The town looked the same and not at the same time. The mill whistle does not blow anymore, but the hills still hold the sound of it. Every yard has a boat in it even if nobody fishes. Every porch has a porch light that means more than it should. That night, I worked late at the diner on the highway. I rolled silverware until my fingers felt numb. A regular named Walt had too much and left his truck. I offered him a ride, but he said he would walk. I drove a different way home to avoid the highway patrol. The Loop is supposed to cut 5 minutes off if you catch the light right. I told myself it was no big deal. It was just a road. It was one of those cold September nights where the mist is not fog yet, but wants to be. The kind that beads on your windshield like sweat and moves in a lazy way when you wipe it. The fir trees leaned over the road and the headlights made pillars out of them. My heater blew damp air that smelled like old coffee and wet cloth. The radio caught nothing but a preacher out of Portland that comes in at night. He said a thing about circles, and I laughed because it felt too neat. There are 2 signs you look for on the Loop. One is a yellow one with a falling rock and a bent corner where a truck hit it in the spring. The other is a white cross for a girl named Ashley Brandt, who flipped her car on black ice in 2009. People hang fresh flowers on her cross every year on the first real frost. The flowers were there that night, wilted and clean, tied with blue ribbon. I slowed and touched the brake for no reason except respect. The road curved and the trees thickened. My headlights found a stump with a strip of red survey tape wrapped around it like a tongue. 50 yards later, the same stump was there again. I know how that sounds. Trees repeat themselves. The forest plays tricks. But the tape had a twist at the top like a little flame, and it did the exact same twist down to a frayed edge when I saw it the second time. I kept going. I told myself I had just noticed the tape late. The preacher went quiet and the radio filled with a soft hiss that tasted like metal in my mouth. I put my hand on the dial and felt it warm and then cold like a breath on skin. A mile marker turned up on the right, white post with a black 3 painted on it. It looked newer than the road around it. My car rolled over a shallow pothole that made the wheel bump, and I thought, fine, I will avoid that next time I come around. That is when it hit me. I was doing the thing I said I would not do. I was talking about a next time on a road that is a circle. The white cross for Ashley showed up again. The blue ribbon now had a knot pulled so tight the plastic bit into itself like teeth. The flowers were wet this time, as if it had just rained, even though my windshield had been dry for a minute. I put the window down a crack to clear the glass, and the cold that came in had a smell like creek water and hot breaks. Behind it was something sweet and old, like picked blackberries in a bucket you forgot on a porch. My phone's navigation woke up without me touching it and said, in its blank woman voice, "Continue on Loop Road for 3 miles." There was no address in it. The little blue arrow turned in place and then smoothed out like something had helped it. I told myself it was an update. The car ticked like cars do when they are tired. The stump with the red tape came again, tape now hanging lower, wet and heavy, like a tongue that needs a sip of water. The mile 3 marker slid past. The pothole thumped under my tire in the same soft way. I slowed. I put my blinker on like that meant anything in empty woods. I looked for a pullout. There was 1 2-car lengths of gravel with a rusted can of chewing tobacco pressed into the mud like a coin. I pulled off and let my engine idle. It should have been quiet, just bugs and the trickle of the river below. It was not. The woods were holding their breath. The radio hiss softened, and in it I heard a voice like my own voice on an old answering machine. It said, "You missed your turn." It said it in my voice the way I sounded at 13 on a tape my mom kept on a shelf. The back of my neck prickled so hard my scalp hurt. I turned the radio off. The hiss did not stop. It just shifted to the air vents. A light moved between the trees across the road, slow, up high like someone walking with a lantern on a stick. My headlights found nothing. My rear window fogged from the edges in. The glass drew lines like a child tracing a circle. I put the car in drive. The seatbelt behind me unspooled in a smooth, practiced way, and the buckle knocked once against the door. I did not touch it. I did not look back. Then, in the rearview mirror, I saw a shape settle into the back seat, wet hair dripping onto the vinyl, and a pale face lift with a smile that did not know when to stop. The smile did not stop. It kept going a little too far at the corners, like the skin was not sure where to end. Water dripped off her hair in thin threads and soaked the stitching in my back seat. The belt behind me slid out smooth, crossed her chest by itself, and clicked into the latch with a soft, polite sound. The buckle rocked once like a nod. "Drive," she whispered. I pressed the gas. The car moved like it had been waiting for that. The tires hummed. The trees leaned in. The radio stayed off, but a soft hiss folded into the sound of the heater. It tasted like pennies and creek water. My rearview mirror showed her face without a shadow. Her eyes were too calm. She looked like a girl who had been cold for a long time and had decided to stop fighting it. "Where do you need to go?" I asked, because that is what you do when a stranger sits in your car. My voice sounded thin. "Home," she said. "Where is home?" 3 miles, she said, the same way the nav voice had said it. She did not blink. The stump with the red tape came up on the right. The tape hung lower, heavy with wet. The mile 3 marker passed. The soft pothole found my tire again like a handshake. The white cross for Ashley Brandt appeared ahead with the blue ribbon tied tight and new, like a fresh bow on a gift. My headlights threw a white bar across the letters and a sheen of water moved over the paint. It looked like the cross was breathing. "You missed it," the girl said as we went by. "I missed what?" "The turn." Her smile eased wider with a sound like the edge of paper tearing. "You always miss it first." "I will turn around," I said. "I will go back." "You are not back," she said. "You are around." The heater coughed once and blew cold. The window fogged and then cleared in a circle, one line at a time, like a hand drawing it. The lantern light moved in the trees again, slow and steady, keeping pace with us, higher than a person should hold a light. The hiss from the vents shifted into a voice I knew too well. It was my own, younger, out of an old tape in my mom's kitchen. It said, "Turn here," and I felt a soft tug on the wheel even though my hands were tight on it. "I am not turning into the river," I said. I did not mean to say river. The word sat cold in my mouth. She leaned forward until the seatbelt went tight across her chest. Wet hair brushed the back of my neck. "That is where it goes," she whispered, not unkind. "That is where it always goes." I eased off the gas. The car kept the same speed. The speedometer needle did not move. The needle did not care about me. The trees pressed closer. Between trunks I saw the river, black and wide, with white on it where it had teeth. The pullout showed up again. The rusted can in the gravel looked new now, the label red and loud and wrong in the dark. I could not remember if I had seen a guardrail anywhere on the loop. I could not remember any other cars. "Take the turn," my own voice said from the vents. "Take it now." The white cross came. The blue ribbon twitched as if a breath had stirred it. I saw for a second another cross behind it, half built in the ditch, leaning against alder roots. It had no name. The nails in it were new and bright. A hammer lay in the mud. Water ran down the wood in clean lines like someone had just washed it. My hands got slick. The wheel felt hot and then cold. I said, "What happens if I do not?" She sat back with a small wet sigh. The seatbelt tightened across her like a patient hand. She had a thin loop of blue ribbon around her wrist. It left a mark in her skin like frostbite would. "You will," she said. "You always do. Or you do not. And you ride." "Ride where?" "Around," she said again, and her voice doubled for a second with the nav voice until it sounded like two mouths talking into mine. "Around and around and around until the river is the only straight line left. The stump with the tape, the mile marker, the pothole, the lantern, the cross, it rolled like a wheel with spokes." My stomach felt wrong. Time went soft at the edges. The windshield fogged and cleared. The engine ticked in a rhythm I almost knew. I put my blinker on at a place that was not a turn, and the light in the trees paused like it was listening. "Please," I said, "tell me how to get out." "You do not stop," she said. "You do not look back when it knocks. You do not touch the cross. You do not say my name." Her smile eased even wider, and I saw small teeth set too close together, neat as fish bones. "You already said it in your head." "I did not," I said. I had. I had read it on the cross since I was a kid. It sat there like a prayer you do not mean to say. The road ahead took a long, slow bend where the trees opened. The ground fell away on the right. There was no guardrail there. No one had ever put one up. Tire marks scarred the shoulder like old claws. The lantern light drifted down toward the water as if it were going home. I felt the tug again, stronger, gentle, and sure on the wheel. "No," I said, and put the car into the gravel on the left where a logging spur cut in. I did not think it had been there a minute before. It looked fresh and raw and wrong, a bite out of the woods. The car rolled onto it and the loop fell behind like I had stepped off a conveyor. The hiss cut off. The heater blew heat that smelled like dust and rats. My rear view was empty. I stopped and put my head on the wheel. My breath shook. The trees did not lean. The lantern light was gone. When I looked back, the back seat was empty but soaked. A little bow of blue ribbon sat on the seat, tied neat as a gift. Knots dug into the fabric. The wet had a clean, cold smell. I found my way to the feed store at dawn by roads I did not know, and I never took the loop again. It did not matter. The loop found me anyway. Some nights when I drive the city streets, the nav wakes without a touch and says, continue on Loop Road for 3 miles. A white cross shows up on an overpass where I know there is not one, and a seatbelt behind me slides out a few inches, then stops. Once at a red light, the heater whispered in my own 13-year-old voice, "You missed it." And a shape in the mirror smiled too far and waited for me to take the only turn that road will ever let me take.